This is my first video diary about my project with the Media Enterprise Design Lab to create a visual language for their governance toolset. I have been contracted by the Media Enterprise Design Lab at CU Boulder to create a visual language to help them in their efforts to build tools and procedures for supporting organizations create governance structures. So this is something that this visual language is going to be a design challenge, and to help us do this, I'm bringing in two organizations that I'm a part of, the Rocky Mountain Mutual Aid Network, which started in the beginning of 2020 as COVID hit, and recently has rebranded itself and is trying to find an organizational structure. And I've been tasked internally to help find that organizational structure. And so we're going to be doing design, human-centered design, and bringing people in to create that. So we're a perfect candidate to use the tools that the Media Lab the MEDlab is trying to create. I'm also working on a complementary currency project called Favor, and this is favor.solution. And it was developed by this man, Deacon, and the point of Favor is to create a complementary currency so that people who are currently cash poor but are time rich can have a means to exchange goods and services with each other. And it's a member-based currency, and you can learn more about that. It's a very interesting project, and it is also moving from the first phase, where Deacon sort of is the benevolent dictator, into a more community-owned, and to that end, it is also developing its organizational structure. So overall, the point here is that all organizations have structure, and the Media Enterprise Design Lab wants to create tools to help those groups find their structure and define their structure. So you might know organizational structures as this sort of hierarchical pyramid with the president, CEO at the top, and the managers. So here's our president, CEO, kind of the king, and then the managers here, and then the employees along the bottom. Oftentimes, organizations kind of default to this structure. This is the person who owns, let's say, the Facebook group, or owns the organizational structure, is the CEO. Maybe there's an LLC involved, and really, what I'm trying to point out here, or what I'm really thinking about, is that all organizations have structures, and a lot of organizations just have invisible structures. So in the Facebook group, for example, there might be hundreds of people in this group, but there's only a handful of admins. So you have an organizational structure that looks something like this, with hundreds of other people all around it. And then maybe one of those people is like the super special admin. They're the owner of the account. This is something that in online worlds is just so pervasive, because there's one login, and then that one login is either shared amongst people, or basically the structure of these things creates this. And we see this all throughout our lived experience. And there's a lot of groups that want to have be leaderless, not have this. They say, we reject hierarchy. But what ends up happening is you have underground. This is the org chart that is well defined in a modern corporation, and then in a non-hierarchical group, you have all these people, and the structure of the group is not defined. But this person, these three people know this person, and this person controls the website, and these people are all friends, but this person over here doesn't really know anybody, and this is the person that you want to talk to get decisions made. This is the person that you need to talk to get stuff on the website. And you can start to see that organization, any group of people, is going to have these sort of hidden hierarchies, these hidden organizational structures. And I want to turn to right now a great article by Joe Freeman. It was written in the 1970s, and this is called The Tyranny of Structurelessness. And this is an amazing article that really gets to the heart of why so many of these so-called leaderless or flat organizations end up kind of not being that. You can say that you have a flat organization where everybody is on the same level in the hierarchy, but if these two people actually own, startup LLC, then they ultimately have power. And what an organizational structure really is it talks about power. It's how do decisions get made, and what are the mechanisms for making those decisions. So not only is this project about defining the org structures, but it's also about defining flows. So this person wants to make a decision and they need to go to here and they need to submit a thing, and then this person needs to send that over to this person who then makes the decision. Or in the flat organization, maybe you have a council, and that council is where decisions need to go. And so there's some process through which the maybe this is the board of directors that sits on that hires the president, who has the managers, who then manage all the employees. And so, like, is there a process for an employee to bring something to management, or is the way that a decision gets made actually going to the manager, and then the manager goes to the president, and then the president brings it into the board? Or can a board member go straight to a manager? How does that happen? Think about the organizations that you work in. Do you know how to make decisions? Like, what if there's a real big contentious decision? How is that going to be addressed? And so this project is going to entail both visualizing structure, but also visualizing process, which sometimes are integrated, sometimes aren't. And I'm going to get into that in a second. So yeah, the Media Enterprise and Design Lab wants to create tools and processes for designing this. And one of the tools that they have put forward is this really cool one called Community Rule. And this is communityrule.info. And this is a toolkit for developing the governance structures. So we can look at a couple examples here. This is their library of organizational structures, and I've selected a few. One is social.coop, and this is a really neat tool, and I'll show you kind of how it works in a second, that has these modules, and you can nest the modules. And in this, in social.coop, they explain their vision and their mission, and then they talk about how decisions get made, and they're using lumio.org as a decision-making tool. They describe referendums and recess, and that they use consensus. Another example of this tool at work is the semi-egalitarian nuclear family. So this is just like an example of applying an organizational structure to something you wouldn't normally think to do, and that's the family. So they say, so right here it describes the board. Decisions that affect the family as a whole are made by the parents. The parents use a consensus process, and often the individual parent making the decision will do it independently when taking responsibility. So that's called duocracy. But the kids have the power to lobby. The kids also have the power of refusal. So we're taking a family structure that never actually decided on anything, but we're looking at it and thinking about what structures are actually in place. And this is what I mean by all organizations have structure. There's always a structure, and whether or not it's invisible or defined, is it an implicit structure or an explicit structure? And how do we start to visualize and give people the tools to visualize the structure of their organizations? Finally, an example here is the Haitian Constitution, and it just really shows you the extent that this tool is able to operate. And so my role here is going to be to create some kind of visual language that can take these disparate views of organizational structure and create visual language. Because right now we have this very text-based, you can drag these modules around and they're using these little icons that don't really explain what's going on. So how could we take this vision of the family and and show it visually. So you have the parents, mom and dad, or the whoever, whatever your caretakers are. Maybe you have three of them or whatever, and they're making decisions. So they're making decisions, but there's also the ability of the children in the house to lobby them. So how do we even like describe the ability to lobby, that these people have less decision making power than these people, and that the means to influence, how do we say like, oh well, they can refuse any order that comes through, because ultimately what we want is the ability to and this is one of the pieces that they've asked me to help them with, is they want to create a poster that you would hang in the office of the organization that really clearly defines like, here's how the structure works, here's where here's how decisions get made. Like that's the big task. Can we distill all this stuff down so that it doesn't look like a set of bylaws? And this would be, I mean, if this was a bylaws, it'd be super straightforward. But I mean, if you've ever looked at your organizational bylaws, it's legal nonsense. So we want to be able to create artifacts that address this stuff. And I've been drawing. This is like, I'm such a dream job, because I've been drawing these organizations. Like this is from 2011, when I was part of Occupy Sandy, or 2012, and looking at, oh, how can we have a spokes council where representatives of these different groups come to the center and make decisions, and organizational nodes and sub nodes, and the process of how to, like, this was me just trying to make sense of how the mutual aid network from Occupy Sandy worked. Even earlier, this is a drawing I did of like the dream structure of Occupy Wall Street, which I was a part of, and trying to determine how could a leaderless, structureless organization make structure without losing its sort of non-hierarchical values. But here's the thing, with this stuff, when I draw, I can draw this like this picture of, you can draw this picture that looks very, a little more decentralized, but the shape of this actually can change, and so you can really hide things in an organizational structure. Like all of a sudden, this doesn't look that much different. It's just like there isn't a president. We get rid of the president, or the high level, the executor, and we all of a sudden just have a group of representatives that represent these smaller units of people. And now, but there's also what's hidden here is that in a spokes council model, this representative in the center is actually all of the people. Like anyone can come and be that representative. So there's another design challenge there. And going back, here's a design of the Agile Learning Centers network that's trying to show the different forms of the membrane of people. There's people that participate, and they move into higher levels of participation, and as they move into these higher levels of participation, they pass through membrane. So there's a process of elevating people, and then these purple represent the actual schools that so these orange dots might be the students, and the blue dots are people who are the facilitators, Agile learning facilitators, and they're being kind of absorbed into the cell membrane of this organization. Now, this presented an interesting conundrum, because there's like this bullseye, and what's happening is people are moving into it. But the reality is that the people on the inside of the bullseye are actually doing this job of holding. If we can imagine this is someone looking down, they're holding all these other people. So there's the way that these are visualized. You can think of this this circle, this bullseye diagram, turned on its side, can become the this pyramid here. And the pyramid can say like, oh well, if you're the inner circle, you're up here. There's a small inner circle that is pushing influence down. However, um, you know, just by inverting it, it becomes more of like an atlas. Like these people are holding um, all the other people. So there's like just in the difference of the directionality of a thing, we're looking at like this one as dominance, power over, and then this one is representing leadership from beneath, leadership that is you're taking responsibility to be the ground, to be holding. So this is all in how a thing is represented. Uh, really changes just like the shape of a thing can change how it's understood. Here's another organizational structure that's showing like individual schools that form into hubs, and those hubs all form the network. And I was trying to illustrate here that the center, the nodes on the outside are all connected. So you don't have a central node. We can look at this again. So there's like, you might have a founder, and that founder goes and collects their initial team. And the founder is really really key. You need the founder to hold everything together. But if you don't, another way to look at this would be the founder at the top, and then everyone answering to the founder. But if you want to have an organization that's going to last, then you want to get that founder down here so that they are and flatten the organization. So you need to build the relationships between the founding team. And what this begins to look like is a much more distributed structure. And if you think about this, we put these side by side, and if I were to take out the founder, I were to remove the founder, get rid of them, all of a sudden all these links are all broken, and these individuals fly off into space. But if I remove the center from this structure, the structure is still sound. These people are all connected to each other. They don't need the founder anymore to hold the shape in place. So that's just something that I was trying to explain in this diagram, and showing that and we're moving it up the level. So these are the individuals, and there's a founder, and the founder connects to a regional node that connects all of these other groups together, and you start to create this organizational structure that is a little more distributed. However, in this, of course, there's a real great comic out there somewhere that shows your standard hierarchical org chart, and it's so neat and tidy. Of course, this is how it works. But when you really start to think about it, organizations are always messy, because these two people are married to each other, but this person is also having an affair with this person, and this person actually knows about, their coworker knows, so they have more power. They can talk directly to the top, and these three people are just completely aligned against this person, and actually go to this manager for support. So like the reality of organizations is that they're much messier than they are on paper. So that's just another challenge for starting to represent organizations. How can we represent that messiness? And then here's just breaking down sort of the pieces of this. Another way of showing the nesting of organizational structure, sort of rhizomatic thing, but without the connections between. So, anyways, that's some of the past stuff that I've done on this topic, and and really the challenge here I think is going to be to create a universal language. And I've queued up a bunch of pictures of organizational design here. Here's old old tile work that's showing the organization of soldiers and knights and chariot drivers. So this could have been this almost could be an organizational design. Here's an Egyptian piece that's showing the different processes of picking up grain, it looks like, and tilling the fields, and you can see maybe even by like the size of the people here, you've got this little person, giving the food to this giant person who's like putting it in the storehouse. There's like a lot of organizational information here, and information about how the power structure is and who's in charge, just by the size of the individuals. So that's just a way of thinking about this stuff. Here's another piece that I think is a Greek or Roman pantheon of the gods. There's an organizational structure. It's defining. We know that this is probably Zeus and Hera, and we can see that they're in the center, and then radiating out from them are the gods that are, kind of on the same level, but also not. And then there's these other people that are supporting them. These are organizational snapshots of organizational structure. I found a lot of these pictures of church, mid dark age or mid century. I don't know, the church organizational structures. There's a place where you need to know who's in charge, who answers to who, and people depict that. And then you have the fun, like the interesting aspect that there's actually like God above involved in these organizational structures. And from history that like the king is ordained by God, so the king might sit at the top of the organizational structure, but then on top of the king is God. Here's a really interesting looking one that's showing what I imagine are different houses that are in the, maybe this is Prussia, or I don't know the history of these images, but you can see it's just another way of visualizing these organizational structures. Here, of course, is the United States, how it's organized with the states. You have the Constitution that interacts with the Supreme Court, and the Constitution creates the executive with the president and their cabinet, and then the legislative and with the Senate, which interacts with the Supreme Court, and then the Congress, which has representatives from all the states, and each of the states have their own little their constitution and their structures. And it's just like what a mess. Look at all this stuff and the different Navy, Army, Treasury, and how these things interact. But what's clear in this is like you know where certain powers reside, and this allows people to interact. And I think that's one of the key concepts across this entire thing is how does someone interact with your organization? So here's a couple other examples of ways of showing organizational charts. Here's our stockholders, board of directors, executive committee, the president, the first vice president, second vice president, and then all these people down the line. Lots of organizational charts. Here's an organizational chart of a computer, how the different elements of a computer. So I think there's going to be some inspiration from thinking about other ways that things, other things that we wouldn't think of as organizational structures might influence this. Again, here's the pyramid, very popular. Here's the Wikimedia Foundation, lots of lines, lots of showing how things are related, these dotted lines encapsulating, Wikimedia versus the Wikimedia projects. Here's a bubbly, this is something about Wikimedia, and you can start to see that there's like these bubbles of influence, these groups, maybe these are different sections or segments, and they have different sizes. So there's lots of different ways of describing these things. Here's a lovely comic that shows some different organizational designs that are definitely not true, but it's like Apple, here's Steve Jobs in the center, and everything's radiating out from him. And now that orientation, like this is the classic, like this is what all the so many online groups are, is like there's this one benevolent dictator that people actually like and approve of. This is where Favor is right now. Deacon has created Favor. It's working. People are exchanging this currency, But at any moment, he could just be like, this is the rule now, and change things. So it's not very democratic, but it also makes things easier to move. But I digress. I like this picture because it's showing a sort of process, and it kind of brings me into the next line of thinking around how to create a universal, something that's universal, a universal visual language. And here is someone pointing at a organizational chart at the Pentagon, and this is the real key is that the organizational structure creates design limitations. What is visualized creates the invisible that is not visualized. Whatever is in the organizational design leaves out things in the same way that our that our that our org design leaves out all these little wacky bits and bobs. So that's just that really gets me thinking about, okay, how do we, because we not only do we want something that we want a number of things to happen here. We want stuff that's inclusive. So we want visual language, a visual language that represents people, but could represent any group of people. But here's the thing: is like, okay, here's our person, or maybe it's a keyhole. But people come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, tall and short and wide and skinny. Some of them are have different forms of mobility. Some of them, like how would I with this iconography here? How do I represent someone who maybe has an amputation, who doesn't, who has only one arm? Like these people don't even have arms; they don't even have legs. Like a human being actually looks more like this, little dough man. Um, but some human beings, look like this, and some human beings are like this, and some human being, and they have things that are kind of attached to them, not attached to them, that they need, that aren't part of them, but maybe are part of them. There's lots of considerations in just like um, how to represent the human form, and then you have all kinds of representations of like this person goes over here. Well, is an arrow going to be universally recognizable? How do we describe that? What is that going to be like? And one here's an example that I really adore, and this is showing Japanese emoticons. Emoticons are the icons created by characters that you type through your keyboard, and you might recognize the smiley face right here. So these are Japanese emoticons, and these are American, I think English speaking emoticons. And the thing I want to point out here is look at how all of these, the American ones, all start with a colon and a dash, right? Whereas I think the Japanese character set just has a lot more fun shapes. So you get, I love these emoticons. But notice that the mouth here, relatively the same. And of course, I selected for ones that had relatively the same mouth, but I've seen this elsewhere, talked about in the United States and maybe more Western countries. We look at the mouth to determine how we for emotional state, and this is, people have posited that this is the reason that mask wearing is more prevalent in Eastern countries than Western countries, because covering up your mouth actually prevents, blocks a communication method for communicating intent and emotion, whereas the Eastern cultures use the eyes to denote what's going on emotionally for someone. So a culture that, so thinking about a visual language that is representing humans, representing actions, representing ways that things move and happen, trying to do this in a universal way, where I do not have any experience of living in a culture where the eyes are the seat of emotional transference. And so like anything that I'm going to default to the mouth. And of course the smile, is how you show happiness, but um, that's not true for other places. And this is the, like, the heart, I think, of the matter, is that um, we want to create a tool that allows people to uh, understand at a glance what's going on in their organization, how things happen, and what the processes are, and um, but we need to be aware that the design limits possibility, and that if I make a, if I'm using a iconography set that is showing um, something like this, you know, you want to do this to be happy, and this is not happy. Or if you're not happy, you go here and then you do this thing and then this happens. Whereas but so someone might look at this and they're like, oh, what's the difference between these two things? You can think of people who are neurotypical, that aren't going to recognize facial patterns. There's this huge amount of edge cases, and I really want to make that a core design um, consideration, essentially, for this. So that's really it. That's the long and short of this. As I'm entering into it, how do I represent organizations, represent organizational structures, represent organizational processes, and how do we do that in a way where it's recognizable to any group in the world. So that's my work. I'm super excited to be working on this. I'm feeling like it's a lot. It's a big it's a big project, and within the budget and the scope, like, how much can I really figure this out? I'm not a researcher. I don't have a big background in this, but I am connected to this academic institution that does. And I've just, my experience of being in all these organizations, I think will be very handy in this. And as I am supporting the mutual aid network here in Denver, and the favor currency, I imagine that there's going to be a really awesome opportunities to start to visualize this stuff and use the learning. Like, I'm really able to be in this while I do the design. So it's very exciting. And that concludes the first vlog. Hopefully this will start getting shorter. If you've watched this to the end, I applaud you, and feel free to subscribe to the channel and do whatever you want there. Thanks for watching. All right. Bye-bye. Bye now.